Welcome everyone. I just want you to know we're just going to wait a few moments before we actually get started. So take your time, grab some coffee or water. We'll start at 10 sharp, 11 o'clock sharp. Great. Welcome everyone. We've still got people joining us, so welcome. So good morning. We've got a number of people joining us from New Zealand as well. So good morning everyone. Today's session we are going to be looking at superhuman customer service, automation first customer service strategies to help you prepare for the downturn. Now, before we begin, can I just have a quick show of hands if we're good with sound? Awesome. Great. Okay, awesome. Now, let's get into it. So just an FYI, so some housekeeping. This session will be recorded and we will be sending it out to you post this as well. But the benefit of staying on live is that we will be having an open Q&A. So as Steve and I will be talking through the session, we are open to questions. So if you have any specific examples or use cases that you want to discuss or challenges, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. And we've also got Naveen in the background who'll be helping to manage those as well. Great. So welcome, I am your host Maria, and we have our guest speaker today. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Steve Nuttall. Welcome, Steve.
Hello, Maria. Hi, and welcome everybody.
Great. Just to give you a bit of background about Steve as well. So Steve is a director and partner of Fifth Quadrant. They are a customer experience strategy, design, and research company. So Fifth Quadrant provides Steve with the opportunity to provide outstanding solutions to taxing business questions. So I'm sure many of you will have a lot of questions around what's been happening as well. So Steve is particularly passionate about helping clients deliver on their customer centricity strategies and business performance goals. something that we are all sort of trying to align on in this whole COVID situation. So now he will be able to provide you insights and thought leadership into how established industries and markets are being disrupted by the digital revolution, and how this is transforming the way organizations do their business with their customers.
Thanks, Marie.
Okay, and just a quick overview in regards to Freshworks. Most of you would have been seeing our comms and everything else. So just a quick snapshot. We've been around for 10 years. We are a SaaS suite of products for businesses that focus on customer engagement. Now, we enable organizations to provide better customer service by increasing their productivity of their customer service team and empowering the end customer with intuitive self-service tools such as chatbots. Great. So we have over like 200,000 customers across the globe. So there's a couple of logos across the bottom of some local customers there as well. Feel free to chase up with the team if you want more information on their use cases. Great. So in today's session, we're going to just break it down into two key areas. The first part, we'll be looking at some of the ideas of how we and others think about bots and what's happening right now. So we'll look at a couple of trends and things that we're seeing. And then in the second half, we will actually break it down into a series of three key areas that you can look at, a series of tactics to deploy the right automation first strategy. Okay, and just be mindful, like there may be a couple of high level strategies where you may not be there in your journey. So we will be, so please feel free to put in there for clarifications or anything, because we will have a mix of people across that AI journey. Great. So just for Steve and I to get a gauge of where everyone is in their AI journey, we're just going to quickly launch a poll just to see where everyone's adoption is in terms of their customer service with AI.
What's your prediction, Maria? How many people do you think are deploying AI?
I don't know, maybe 25%?
Yeah, I'll be going with that. 25, 30%, yeah.
The early adopters. Mind you, Australia and New Zealand, we tend to be quite early adopters, so I'm hoping for a bit more.
I think it might be a little bit lower than that. If we combine, I think if we combine deploying and also experimenting, then that's kind of our, we'll call that our user base. So yeah, I think if we get to about a third there, I think that's reflective of the marketplace in terms of what we're seeing in terms of AI adoption. And I think a lot of people are in that experimental phase or putting the business case together.
No, definitely. Especially with right now, with everything that's happening, we've seen a lot of businesses pushing into digital and looking at quick ways to jump into that space. So I've just had a couple of questions. I can't see the poll. It should be in the middle of your screen. Hopefully it's popped up. Okay, wait another 5 seconds and we'll quickly share the poll results. Okay, if we could end the poll and share the results, please. Okay, I think I was quite optimistic with my 25%. Okay, Steve, can you see the poll results?
I see that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, I think as we thought, around a third are at some stage of deploying AI, and yeah, I think that is the case, that people are more likely to be experimenting than kind of a fully rolled out. But to your point about the response to the first stage of the outbreak of coronavirus, when a lot of contact centers went down and when the voice channel was simply unavailable and we couldn't cope with the volume of calls, organizations were switching rapidly over to bots and digital and so on. So I think that's been a bit of a wake-up call if for those organizations that don't have the capability in AI and a chatbot interface.
Yes, well, like I remember when it first happened, and you actually couldn't even call at times because the phone lines kept dropping out. There was just such a surge of people, using that call channel. So yeah, I think it was like last 5 years of this digital transformation that everyone was like, yes, we'll get there. And then all of a sudden this happened. And it was like, if you weren't there, you had to be. Okay,
Correct.
so that's a good gauge in terms of how we'll sort of bring up some of these conversations and use cases as we go through today's session. Okay, cool. Now, let's get started. So, as you've seen, like AI and bots have been making the headlines in terms of what's been happening with COVID and how they've been enabling and easing the pressure off a lot of businesses. Like obviously the first industry that would have felt the impact would have been retailers. So a lot of retailers with the lockdown would have had to close their doors. And what we saw with our customers, everyone was who was already in the digital. So I'm just seeing questions pop up. I'm going to actually just put that down for a moment. Those that were digital were increasing that space, so they were getting more people to help support that area. And those that weren't digital were quickly trying to enable that as well. So is that something you saw as well, Steve, in regards to when it had first hit and what people or businesses were doing with bots at the time as well, or even chat?
Yeah, look, I think, we were seeing a level of chat adoption. Obviously, COVID, there was a significant level. Our contact center CX maturity report that we published at the start of the year, showed that certainly, customer experience leaders in particular were figuring out where and how best to deploy bots. And I think we're, had a better view on their overarching strategy for the deployment of AI in customer service. I think we were seeing that, the early adopters often were deploying AI more at the back end than at the front end, just because there's kind of less risk, obviously, in terms of directly interfacing with customers. So giving agents and employees better tools powered by AI to interact with customers, and then moving from there into the rollout of bots interfacing with customers. But clearly, what we've seen post COVID is certainly a lot of the organisations that we speak to, the vendor community is pretty much inundated with RFQs at the moment for bot deployments.
No, and especially in the background, ensuring that their agents are well equipped to deal with everything that was happening as well, and ensuring that that productivity wasn't impacted by technology or some of the processes that they had in place that may have been outdated as well. Yep. So a quick stat to throw out there in regards to bots. So we found that about 67% of consumers expect to use messaging apps when interacting with a business. Why not, with the whole shift towards online and digital native customers that are on the rise, and especially with COVID, we're going to this contactless transaction phase now, where we're moving in and out of restrictions or lockdown. It's quite important to be able to have that agility to have that contactless transaction and conversation. Okay, and I'll just go into what we're finding. So the other thing is we've seen the pros of it all, but then actually looking at some of the wrong reasons. So there's a couple of examples on here as well. There was the example where you've got on the bot that's actually referring, answering questions around what's the weather like this weekend, and the bot's actually trying to help the person, and the person's actually getting frustrated where they're not getting the answer that they want, and then the bots are also not getting what they're asking for, and they sort of both give up on it. And I just feel like there's going to be this trend of bot memes and bot failures that's going to come out off the back of all this. And especially when you were saying, Steve, a lot of these early adopters are actually working on the back end before they go to the front end. Right. That's a good example, a perfect example of maybe just equip your agents to have the right tools to begin with, and make sure that they can work, maximize their productivity first, and then you can kind of figure out, from there in terms of a customer facing deployment, because people will, as soon as they see
a bad bot experience, that will be their view of all bots, not just that brand, but it will apply to their perception of bots more broadly. And of course, you know, it's humorous, it's funny, that gets shared, you know, very quickly as well. So the message, "I had a bad bot experience," is quickly shared, and it reinforces a very negative perception.
And talking about rogue bots, we've got the other example there of the infamous Microsoft bot, Tay.ai, and it's, you know, they've given it like all this information, and it's just gone a bit rogue, and it's just like had so many tweets. It's like, "See you soon, humans, need sleep now, so many conversations today." It's just like, you know, you can only enable them so much, and you need to sort of understand what the limitations are as well. So, yeah.
100%. Yeah, no, that's right. I think, you know, look, people talk about AI. You know, I do feel it's, you know, it is very much a marketing term, AI, rather than a technology term, because truth be told, it's, you know, kind of, it's neither artificial at the moment. It's not particularly intelligent, though I'm sure that's all going to change moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. I was going to turn this. Okay, just sort of checking Q&A area. So how does Freshwork? Okay, so the question is, how does Freshwork going to attend or tend to this? So in regards to the bots perspective, so we can actually do a deep dive into that. But one, you have the tools, which is one part of addressing some of these queries in terms of bots, but also in terms of what Steve was saying, looking at it back end to ensure that you're able to set up the appropriate workflows and test it out before you go live, and also have a constant reiteration of that whole design thinking and constantly updating it. You know, what are your thoughts on that, Steve? Because you can always have the option of, you know, having the technology, but how do you actually set it up to ensure that it works?
Correct. I mean, the success of a bot deployment hinges fundamentally on your knowledge base, and the way that data is stored, the integration of your different technology systems, so that you have real-time access to all of the data that you need about the customer, you know, to fully understand who they are, the nature of their query. And again, I think, you know, coming back to, you know, the early stage of the COVID pandemic, quite a lot of organizations were caught out there. You know, the knowledge base simply wasn't set up to handle the types of questions that customers were going to be asking at a time when people were being furloughed, at a time when organizations were having to shut down, and so on. We just hadn't prepared for that, and that's, you know, and it happened really quickly as well. And so, yeah, 100%, you need to have the back end, and all aspects of the back end, not, as I say, the knowledge systems, the way systems talk to one another, to be able to then deploy a bot successfully at the front end.
Okay, awesome. So what we'll do is we'll carry on through this session. I know we're getting quite a few questions now coming through. We'll get through sort of the first part of the presentation, and then we'll start answering a few more as we go through. So we are seeing them, keep them coming. We are actually taking note of them. So if we don't cover them in the session, Steve and I will sort of go over any questions, and we'll send those out to you post this as well.
Thanks,
okay. I just see them popping up, so I'm just trying to like be mindful of both sides. Okay, so just to start off with, you're finding that self-service is on the radar, but it's not yet getting that job done. So even though we're finding that 57% of companies believe that self-service utilization should already be higher, a lot of these companies are only being able to, like 65% of those companies say that fewer than 20% of their interactions are solved entirely without agents. So, and then we're also expecting that half of these companies feel that most of these interactions should be handled without agents by 2025. You've got 5 years and you're only addressing 20% of that, and that's only 65% of the companies. So then that's not even the full 100%. You know, then we need to look at what does this actually mean, right? This is where you have to look at, so what's the holdup? Put it simply, our bot experiences aren't as effective as they could be, especially if we're only addressing less than 20% of these queries. We're not making customers want to choose bots, right? So you're finding here on this slide, you'll see that only 9% of consumers are currently able to trust bots to solve their problems. And that key word there is trust. So even though you may have the best bot in the world, they're not yet trusting it, right? And what are your thoughts on that, Steve? Because I know you've been helping a lot of businesses set up some of these workflows and things in the background, but how are they finding it with rolling it out and getting that adoption?
Yeah, look, it is really important to understand, ultimately whether, your customers are going to be ready to engage with the bots that you're investing in. There is an element that there is a degree of resistance, and certainly, that's kind of borne out from some of the work that we've conducted on the readiness of customers to engage with bots. And it kind of goes back to a bad bot experience as well, because if you've had a bad experience, or somebody's had a bad experience, generally you're just going to, not put much faith in the ability of the bot to be able to ultimately solve your problem. I mean, again, it really depends on what's the problem. If you're just trying to find something on a website, the bot may well be able to point you very easily in the right direction. But if you've got a really kind of complex, difficult query, then maybe not. So I think number one, it depends on the nature of the problem. I think the other point is what we mean by I don't trust a bot. Is it you just simply think that the bot is just incompetent and has a very limited ability, or is it a little bit more sinister in terms of the ethics of artificial intelligence and how data about you might be used, and also how that data is being gathered, and whether that data is a true portrayal and representation of you. I think, so I personally, I think that statistic is more about the level of competence rather than the ethics of AI. But then I do feel that moving forward, we will move rapidly from, once these bots are super competent, into a broader and I think a deeper conversation about the ethical underpinning of that and the principles and frameworks and governance around AI, which ultimately is underpinning a chatbot.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot to it when you just look at it on a high level and just say, okay, we need to get bots in place, because there's all these different things that still need to sort of fall into place, not just from a business perspective and that customer experience. So it's a number of things where you've got the industry adoption as well, and what's actually happening across the actual country, because considering what's been happening with like Australia and New Zealand, for example, where we've had like us go into lockdown and go into having to quickly adjust to the whole bot and messaging channels, the experience may not have been as good, so that trust may not have been there yet. So having to manage that is quite substantial in a short amount of time. So I guess the other stat was saying, like, more than 87% of companies, meanwhile, feel that they can educate customers on the value and relevance of the digital CX options. Again, I personally feel that, yes, you can market it as well as you want, but when the actual customer goes through that experience, it needs to align with what you're educating them on. So going back to what you're saying, Steve, in regards to ensuring that, their actual experience is good and not negative.
And I think you need to be clear when your customers are interacting with a bot rather than a human. You don't set the bot up so it pretends to be a human. I think you should be very upfront. You know that you're interacting with a bot, and we find that customers are a little bit more forgiving if they know it's a bot. Sometimes it becomes a bit of a kind of a playful interaction. They'll test to see how far can I push this bot and so on. Particularly if it's kind of the first time you've interacted with it.
No, definitely. Like even with us, we've got Freddie, and And the sort of persona that we've got with him is, you know, a man's best friend that will help you. So it's like this cute little dog icon in the image, and then you've got him helping you around. So you know that it's not a human, but it's a bot. Okay, so this sort of takes us back to essentially where, you know, we're in that same situation where we were with IVR years ago, where companies saw an opportunity to manage the volumes, cut costs, improve agent capacity, but they, you know, failed to sort of acknowledge one sort of simple reality, and that was it only works if the customer gets what they want. So you don't want to be calling in and choosing the different options and then being routed around to all these people and nothing gets solved, and you've repeated yourself and you've gone through all this frustration, right? So you may actually have that with bots. So if you're not prepared, you may have bots that aren't addressing those pain points where they're slow interactions. You're finding that it's not getting the right options. You're needing to repeat your personal information again. You know, and it just adds to the complexity of that journey rather than simplifying it, which we were hoping to do with IVR back in those days. And a lot of us have refined it. Yeah, customers will still require agents, but now they'll be even more frustrated. So that brings us to the second section, where we're actually going to look at the 3 key strategies that we're going to talk about in terms of high level, where you can actually deploy these, but also look at it from a point of view of how they're going to help your customer. So being that, you know, customer first, and then looking at how the technology can sort of build into those workflows and processes that you've got there. So Steve, feel free to jump in here. And I know you've got some good stats here in the background as well. So the 3 key sections that we're going to talk about are effortless service. So we're talking no friction, quick responses, fast resolutions across any media platform, right? So then we've got proactive service, where we've got consumers where you want them to have, you want to be able to serve them, where we're seeing this transition of they're moving from that state of meet my needs to anticipate my needs, where, you know, online shopping, you go in, you shop, you put into the cart, you pay for it. You already assume that they're going to send you a confirmation. You already assume that they're going to keep you updated on that shipping journey as well. They're already wanting you to anticipate their needs.
Correct. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I was going to say, it's you know, it's just about make it easy, you know, walk in my shoes, you know, as you say, anticipate what I want. And, you know, I think, you know, coming back to the role that AI can play here, I think, you know, as we'll go through the next few slides, but, you know, kind of as we think about the times that we're in now during COVID, you know, we more and more are demanding experiences where all of the friction's taken away, where brands really understand your journey and where you're at, and, you know, brands start to figure out what it is you want next. I think in the current times, this is the critical bit. So, well, as we go through, you know, we obviously can talk more about what role AI and bots can play in delivering that experience.
No, definitely. And yeah, so let's get started on that first. Let's look at some of these problem statements as well. So as we break down the next 3 sections, we can actually look at some of these sort of paradoxes, where you've got, you know, businesses that are trying to serve multiple customers at once, but they're still trying to personalize each interaction. And you've got customers that are expecting shorter wait times, but they also want to be treated equally. You know, aid self-service, but also have a great experience for customers, helping to cut back those costs and also being able to scale. And also automating these mundane, repetitive tasks from a, you know, agent perspective, but also being able to transfer to a human at any point. So that's that true omni-channel experience where you're switching in between those different channels. Okay.
Correct.
So before we get into this section, if we could just do a quick poll just to gauge everyone's challenges. I know we've seen a couple come in through the Q&A. Well, just going to have that going live while we're doing this. Let me just have a look at the Q&A section at this stage. Quite a few there.
Yeah, there was that question there about how can we, you know, kind of use this in COVID times where customers are more frustrated. So, you know, I think that points the bit about kind of empathy, but also less effort, I think will help to kind of address that question there, you know, about understanding that, yeah, customers are, you know, frustrated. Yes, we can't now have gone from the early stage where we were kind of quite accepting, quite forgiving, to being in, you know, a second wave, more lockdowns, particularly in Victoria, you know, and the consequences of that, you know, people are going to be in a different mindset.
Yeah, and this takes me back when, in a time where we deployed a software in a government body where we had so many patients coming back to us, we had increased calls. And basically what I was doing day in, day out was going into the contact center and going, okay, what are our top 10 queries, and trying to understand and update that. And I'd do first, find the solution, train the agents, ensure that they're well equipped. And then secondly, follow up with all the technology that would be relevant to that as well. So that's like, I don't know, for me, from a contact center point of view, I always try and go back to basics because, you know, technology and everything should be a long-term strategy where you're building and improving on it. But in time like this, even with us in terms of Freshworks and what we were doing, a lot of it is just actually simplifying that problem and just looking at, you know, the key things that you want to address and the customer needs at that time, and then figure out the best as you're going along.
We are blessed with great technology. If we had the same situation when we had the first SARS coronavirus outbreak, version 1, which happened in 2002, but fortunately didn't become a global pandemic. But you know, had the genetic hallmarks of the current SARS virus, we would have been in a bad situation, because certainly IVRs would not have bailed us out of that one. So you know, I think we're in a better situation with regards to the available technology, even though we just take it for granted. Do you want to look at the poll results?
Yes, I was just about to say, because I think we've just had the votes come up. Right. So what are the main challenges in deploying? So a lot of the lack of integration between systems. I think I've seen this in a number of businesses, and it's usually because like you've had years of just different systems and softwares being added without a actual map and strategy around how you're actually integrating that. But the thing is, it's also because you know, businesses didn't seem to think about it that way, and now we're in that stage where you're trying to actually integrate everything and you're finding these limitations. I'm sure, Steve, you've seen this happen as well. A lot of you probably doing the majority of it is unraveling it before you actually piece it together again.
Look, this has been around for many years, this problem of lack of integration, and we've kind of just been able to live with it. It's you know, for those organisations that have shifted onto more, you know, to cloud-based solutions, they've started to overcome some of these integration problems. But many organisations are still operating on premise and in hybrid on hybrid technology platforms with both. With all of the inherent problems that come with this lack of integration. And now we're kind of in this, you know, this new world where we are looking for everything as a service. So we want, you know, we're looking at contact center as a service, we're looking for communication platforms as a service. And for those as a service models to work, you know, you need you need to have system integration driven at the back end through APIs. And so, you know, and so this is a huge, obviously this is a huge, it's a problem, but it's also a huge opportunity to solve this integration problem.
No, definitely. And once you start actually piecing it together, then you can actually start looking at how to actually start adding new things into it. So let's actually get into the first part of it. I think we're getting so many questions. Let's do this. Okay, so part one, we're going to look at why it's important to ensure that your customers have an effortless experience, right? So when you have a bot what's a good deflection rate? Where should you actually be thinking to start, right? This could be, what would you say would be good? You're thinking about maybe 5%, 15%, 20%. If we say 20%, you know, does that sound impressive if a bot can answer 20% of the chat queries that your business is getting? And we're finding that research suggests that a bot is able to handle 20 to 27% of your queries in a contact center. And that's pretty good, right? And it sounds quite impressive. But then it makes you think, what about the 75%? We've got 4 customers that are coming in. One of them has a good experience, but what about the other 3? So when you look at it from that point of view, there's a bigger picture in terms of what this number really reflects. And it's like your bots are making it easier for that one customer as opposed to every 4. But more importantly, it means that your bot is also at the same time adding friction to journeys of other 3 customers, leaving them with unanswered questions, going somewhere else to look for answers. So if we think back to that early example of, asking about the weather, the bot gave up and the person gave up, what would have happened to that person? Where did they go afterwards? For example, if you are a retailer or if you are an organization that's actually, closing sales online, if you don't give the customer what they need, they're going to go off somewhere else. So I think, so unless your bot is able to, I would say 50% of the time address these queries, your AI investment isn't as successful as you're thinking, right? And that's sort of, the number that we're sort of pushing, engaging customers to go and work towards. So that way you're being able to get that return on investment long term as you build on it. And that's something that you can work towards. Thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, look, I think there's obviously a question about the how you manage those negative experiences. Okay, so the bot didn't answer the query. We have to route that through to an agent. The handover has to be really seamless, really effective, and ultimately you can resolve those. You can turn those bad experiences into a good experience, but you don't want to be handling. You don't want to be. You need to drive your success rate up because you're still passing. You're right. There's a cost to the business if you miss out on a sale, but there's also a cost to the business in ultimately passing the query through to an agent as well. Because the cost of operating a contact center in Australia, it's we know the average handling time is 6 minutes on the phone. And we know that the cost per hour of doing that, if your agent's doing 8 calls an hour, it works out to be just under $60 per seat per hour. And then you kind of do the math on that. If that seat is operating for 60 hours a week, over the course of a year, that's $182,000. So that comes from our contact center benchmarking report. So there's a huge opportunity for some of that cost to be, for those routine queries, which are handled by an agent, to be handled by a bot, and you can get a great payback. But if your deflection rate looks like that, 75%, you're just not going to achieve the cost savings, and people will turn around and question that. Ultimately, the business leadership will question the ROI of the bot deployment as well.
No, definitely. I think it's also sort of managing those expectations and setting those goals as well. For businesses that are starting off, like it's great to think that, okay, we're going to go 0 to 100 in that first deployment, but that's not necessarily how it works. You have to constantly be going through iterations of it. It's a big investment in terms of it's just much like training an employee. It's exactly the same process. You're sort of going through it and updating that knowledge base and ensuring that it's relevant at the time. So talking about effortless experience, the next slide there, what do you need to be doing? So when you have a look at what companies normally tend to do, they'll usually start with their L1 queries, and these are the ones that usually go to the FAQ page, and or the bot answers basic queries, like our example at the beginning with the customer that asked about the weather. It could be an L1 query. But when you actually start to look at it, if that's, for example, only 15% of your queries, and you're finding that the bulk of it is in the middle with those advanced L1, you're going to get the most impact from where you're getting the most queries. So then it's like, well, you need to start looking at these user-specific queries and trying to automate those. So these are the ones that such as like, where's my order at? You know, the tracking and everything that goes in the background. Maybe it's a quick answer or a quick link that they get sent to. But if you're able to do the tech work in the background, you're able to provide that effortless experience in the front end. And this is, again, tying back to what you're saying, Steve, is like, you know, those early adopters are actually working in the background to make sure that's all up to date with knowledge base and training and everything else, and then looking at how they deploy that in the front end.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a question that somebody in the audience has put about what are the practical things I need to have in place before I look at chatbots. And for me, this kind of demonstrates what, you know, from a practical perspective, what you should be doing is looking at, you know, kind of a sample of queries, or all of your queries, say over the last, you know, 3 months, and ultimately dropping them into one of these 3 buckets, and figuring out, because if your organization has, let's say 30% of questions sit in that basic L1, you know, for me, that's just a huge opportunity to get an AI deployment in there. On the other hand, if actually what you're getting is more level 2, you probably kind of have a product issue that needs addressing, which AI isn't going to address. So I think you need to do some kind of fundamental, kind of basic analysis of the queries that your customers are putting through to your organization.
Yep. Okay. Where is my volume okay there? It was dropping off, just had a couple of comments. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I hear you good.
Okay. Awesome. Another question there, should you include an option for budget and cost in the survey? That's I think that's a survey question.
Yeah, I think that was in the poll question. So we had an option in that poll about lack of budget. But yeah, good spot. I agree. There should have been.
Okay, right. So talking about like what it means in the back end and what it looks like front end, here's a screenshot to show you what it looks like. So this is sort of our Freshdesk bot screenshot. So this is what you normally see in the front end in regards to, you know, that chatbot screen. And this is what it looks like in the back end where you're trying to train your bot essentially, right? So you have your frequently asked questions that your customers are coming in with, and the dashboard actually tags it and lets you know if there's been any unanswered ones or there's been underperforming ones, where you can actually go in and address some of these queries in the back end to you're making sure that your knowledge base is up to date. And this is easy as just using like a simple box where you can add a new answer or map it to an existing answer as well. So this is just a quick overview just to show you what it can look like and how easy it can be as well, where you don't need coding background with technology nowadays to be able to set up a bot. I know a couple of us there's someone asking me about a demo. What I'll do is I'll show you a quick GIF of how a self-service bot can look like. If you do want a demo, we will have the option at the end to request that post this. And we also do have a follow-up session where we will be doing a workshop on chatbots in about 2 weeks' time, which you can register for after this. Oh, all right. Let me just get this going. Okay, so this bot here is basically someone's gone in to ask about purchasing a ticket to the zoo, and this is straight from WhatsApp actually. And this is all a bot in the background that's actually answering the queries. So it'll go in and it'll answer the queries that the person's asking. It's having that full conversation. And these are just workflows that you create in the background. And then it also goes in to integrate it with that payment option as well. And that is something that we have been deploying for customers globally. So there are a couple of use cases that we could share on that. Awesome. That's a little live snippet. just to give you scale of what bots can actually do. So we have a customer in India, which is actually a fintech that's handling over 380 million transactions per month. And with bots, what they're able to do is create a 60% deflection. So remember how I was saying to work towards that 50%. So they've got a 60% deflection, and then they are also automating about 1,500 decisions in the background as well. So that gives you sort of the scale of what bots can do, and where you can actually even start on, even if you're a small e-commerce online as well.
I think, obviously, Australian organisations are probably not going to be dealing with that volume of queries. So I think it's really reassuring to handle, 380 million, customer queries is hugely impressive.
Yeah. And even just in a local use case, we've got Fitness Passport that use ready to serve their customers, and they're able to get a 30% deflection rate, and that again could be different. Their percentage of those, general FAQs, so those advanced, level 1 queries could be different as well, and that's a great starting point. Okay, so part 2. So we're going to look at how you can be more proactive with your bots, and how this can actually help your bottom line as well. So let's click through. Okay, so these are some quick examples of things that you may have already been seeing. So you've got Netflix there, where you're able to skip the intro. It saves you time, so you can actually get into what you're wanting to do. And then you've got Gmail here as well, where it's actually like, hey, I know you mentioned I have attached a file, and you haven't attached it. Again, this is a great proactive instance where they're able to actually mention that and save you that time and hassle. It's a great proactive example. Okay, oops, wrong screen. So again, this was just a quick stat that we had in a report where we found over 70% of consumers have a preference for brands that offer proactive customer service. Great. So when we actually look at this, you need to actually look at, your bot needs to understand the intent of your customer's query and follow up with the best action. Now, for example, when you are being notified of an online signal such as rage clicks and dead clicks, so we have this feature where in Freshdesk and our options, where if someone is clicking on the same button, frivolously, we actually have the bot pop up and say, hey, is there something I could help you with? And that's so timely, because if they're so frustrated and they're trying to get something done and something's not working, you want to be able to help them right then and there. And that's a great proactive approach to being able to address their query as they're needing it. Are there any other examples you'd like to share, Steve?
Well, I think what's what's really useful here ultimately is that you have to have an understanding of the customer's journey, where the customer started, where the customer's likely to be heading, and again, from our perspective, organizations that are customer leaders have these base a lot of their they're deploying technology with a deep understanding of who their customers are, because they've invested heavily in capturing customer insights, capturing customer feedback, and so on. And they're integrating that data, and their AI is drawing on a lot of that data in order to be more predictive of customer behavior.
And even in just like this little slide example, for example, if you have someone asking for the price of a specific item, or if they're open, you want to be able to create that workflow to say, okay, if they're asking a price for an item, they obviously might be interested in buying it. Why don't we actually just give them that purchase option? And that was in that little screen recording I was showing before, where it was asking about the tickets, and then at the end it said, hey, do you want to buy a ticket? And then it actually led them to the workflow to make the payment. So this could actually in turn benefit you by increasing that bottom line, by being proactive and completing those workflows and understanding that journey of that customer for when they had that query, what does it actually mean and what could it lead to? So this was actually, this is just the imagery of the video that I was showing earlier. So going back into ticketing and actually saying, hey, do you actually want to pay now? So it's creating that sort of moment of wow and delighting that customer as well. Right, how we're doing for time? Okay, we'll go into the last section and we will then go into taking on a few more questions. Okay, empathy. So looking at ensuring that you're actually being able to personalize that experience. Okay, so 40% of Australian consumers say that they prefer human agents over bots for anything beyond a simple customer support. So again, it looks at those level 1 and level 2 queries, and being able to understand when you need to do that handover, because bots can never be as conversational as humans are, and they may not always have the right answer. So, and people are definitely going to be able to test the bot's limits either intentionally or unintentionally. So when your bot doesn't have the answer, you need to allow it to fail gracefully, right? So this is where when you look at, this was an example where Zappos Online, a US example actually, but this was the COVID example where they went through a slump when the pandemic hit, and what they found was they took a novel approach to dealing with how, with the low call volumes of the customers their low call volumes for their customer self-service. So what they did was they introduced this customer service for anything. And this was quite cool because what they did was the service allowed people to reach out and just chat about anything, whether it's about them watching Netflix or if they wanted to talk about travel or anything else that was on their mind. So all they were doing was just to engage with them and also train their bot. And that was one way for them to change that perception of that bad bot experience. So that was quite interesting of how these guys were trying to create that empathy with their brand by creating this sort of channel for their customers to engage with them.
This comes back to that, need to educate the customer that, we talked about earlier, because, to the statistic that's on that page there, that, Australian consumers would prefer human agents over bots for anything beyond simple customer support. If you can, as you say, if you can train your bot to go beyond that and to develop a level of rapport with customers, you are then starting to move into this space where bots develop a level of emotional intelligence, which is the hardest part of it. Is the next phase, but it is the hardest part as well, isn't it?
Well, it really goes into that sort of understanding of intent, right? And I think we sort of touch on that as we go into this, but it's understanding the intent of the customer, that whether it's by keyword or by the way that they, type it in there as well, and definitely train them to understand it from that perspective as well.
Correct, and it depends on whether it's purely a text-based interaction or a voice-based interaction, because if you're using voice as well, excuse me, you can also get a better sense of the customer's emotional state.
I think it's a sentiment analysis where I think there's a couple of actually one of it's something that we're working on where you can actually pick it up in their voice and you'll automatically escalate them in the queue or reroute them to someone that can help them quicker.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay. Right. Okay. Agent experience. Oh, sorry. Just trying to work between the two screens here. Okay. So going back to sort of that escalation of understanding and allowing that bot to fail gracefully, and understanding when the bot is limited, how they can actually transfer it on to the appropriate person. So here you've got, the bot saying, hi, how can I help you? And the person is asking, can you provide a crib in our hotel room? The bot will obviously go, okay, well, I can't really, there's no other workflow to address this. Let me find someone that can help you with this, right? So instead of like that weather example where it was just going back and forth with the guy and the bot trying to talk about the weather for the weekend and the bot not understanding, they're actually just putting them in touch with an agent, and there you've got the bot transferring it across to the agent, and the agent is seamlessly integrating into that chat and just going, hey, we can organize that toddler bed for you, and this is the charge. Easy done, right? Like that is really understanding the problem and allowing it to be transferred to a human without having to have that back and forth. Okay, we are running low on time. I'm just going to quickly summarize sort of that agent experience and AI and automation. So Steve here, we're just looking at, I think we were talking about this before, was understanding how, there's plenty of AI and bots that go behind the scenes to help agents as well. So not only are you going to be able to help your customers in the front end, but you can also empower your agents to in turn provide better and quicker service for your customers. So something we've got is an agent assist bot, which actually helps to, from a number of different ways. One is, you can use workflows and automations to route the query to the appropriate person. And then you can also look at assisting the agent, and even when they're addressing the query, you can have the knowledge base articles coming up and little nudges there to help speed up that process. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know this is something that you were talking about in terms of and specialization.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. No, I think particularly for those higher order queries that are more complex and more difficult for a bot to address. But equally, it's possible to categorize that and into an area of specialization and then route that through to the agent who is the subject matter expert in that particular area. So, ultimately then that leads to, even though it might not be first contact resolution because the bot couldn't resolve it, you've certainly got a much higher chance then that when you are routing that through to an agent, it will be resolved through the second point of contact, which again is a really important metric. Yeah, I think that's a hugely, and from a customer perspective, that's hugely valuable.
No, definitely. And it's interesting because it's like, your customers, it's like, I think this goes back to our first Freshworks brand campaign, which was happy agent equals happy customer. So if you're empowering your employees and giving them the best tools and support, they're going to be able to support your customers equally.
Correct. Frustrated agents equals frustrated customers.
Definitely. I am just going to quickly, this was just a use case, but I think what we'll do is just benefits of just wrapping up today's session so we can quickly answer one or two questions before we go offline. So just breaking down those benefits for that customer for automation first customer service. So not only are you going to be looking at helping the business, but you also need to look at how it helps your customer and your agent, right? So great, if we can also put the poll up, please, Naveen, in regards to the upcoming. Great, thank you. So
what I was going to say, Maria, around that, is that if you're in that camp, when we did that poll at the beginning about where you're at in terms of deployment, if you are in that kind of early stage and you are looking to kind of develop your business case, for me, being able to then look at the putting a business case together, I think it is, look at it through the lens of your customer, look at it through the lens of your people, and look at it through the lens of the business. Because I think that will help you articulate then the benefits as obviously as well as the cost inputs and ultimately the outcomes as well, because a lot of this you can ultimately measure. You can measure the impact on your customer, you can measure the impact on your people, and you certainly can measure the impact on the business. And you will need to do that, because you will need to ultimately, demonstrate the ROI of the investment that you're making as well.
Oh, definitely. And it's always quite, again, like you may be in different stages of your journey, so these are quite high level things. And I saw a couple of questions in there about what should I be starting, that chat, how should I open that chat, how do I get training, is there industry specific training, and there's a couple of different questions in there. We will go through them in the next demo day, but it's also just understanding and learning about it, and doing that research to understand where you are and how it actually fits into your ecosystem, and then also looking at what your business is trying to achieve, and then how that actually breaks down into these 3 categories, and then the different goals you need underneath them to ensure that you're able to meet those high-level strategies as well. Just looking at a couple of questions. Is there any key question that you saw in there, Steve, that you want to answer? There's a
I think there was a question about, is it better suited? Is coming back to the kind of the use case? Is it better suited for product-based use cases than service-based use cases? And I think what we're sort of seeing here is kind of a lot of applications in the area of conversational commerce, and ultimately helping to drive a customer through to a sale. Which is obviously hugely valuable, and I think that's where a lot of bots have been deployed. But in a service-based scenario, so I don't know, let's use the example of of making superannuation decisions. I think we're seeing a lot of AI being deployed there in financial services. And I don't know whether you want to talk about any of the banking examples. Obviously, you did give a banking example previously, but I think it'd be useful just to maybe highlight some of those banking examples of how service-based companies can use bots.
Well, not only that, but just also, I think there's a government query in there as well. So you could actually be looking at, some of the questions that you're getting in from the public. Like we had, for example, I think everyone would have seen where the Australian government deployed WhatsApp as a channel, right? We're using that as a means to channel all the queries into one area instead of just calling the phone lines. So there's different ways that you can utilize bots, and I feel like you can use it both in product and service businesses, but it just really depends how you map that customer journey in terms of the queries that you're going to get. So the different types of questions that you're going to get. And again, like I'm one of those that always has a bottom-up approach. So I always look at what are the basics, what are the key questions that you get asked most, and understand those different workflows, and then sort of build on that. Like it's going back to the whole design thinking concept where you're constantly just going through, setting it up, executing it, trial, error, and updating it constantly. And that's why it's a long-term investment. You can't just put the bot up there and go, okay, great, off you go. And then, someone gets in there and then breaks your bot and it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, you don't want to be, it's not a box ticking exercise, that's for sure. You don't want to be, kind of, okay, we've ticked the bot box, let's move on to the next thing. As you say, you've got to support it, you've got to nurture it, and you've got to learn how it's operating and where it's failing as well as where it's succeeding.
Definitely. Take one more question. I know we're being told to wrap up, but I know there's a lot of people still online. Let me look. Could we use personalize the bot to keywords? Okay, so could we also personalize the bot to use keywords at the customer is using? Yes, in short. Personalizing the bot by the language, and that's something that usually gets picked up on. That's where you can have multiple answers mapped to the same question, or different questions mapped to the same answer. There can be different ways that you can ask the same question, right? Okay. Okay. Another question in there. Is everyone okay to stay online to answer some more of these questions? Just wondering if we spend another 10 minutes, Steve, just answering some of these questions.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Lachlan, if you can put it into the chat box, we will answer it.
There's a question there about, what are the thoughts on the names that companies give bots? Some people, don't have a, should you, I think really kind of what the question is about how much personality do you want to give your bot? And again, little research that we've done, in the past, demonstrates that there is you've got to know who your audience is first, I think, because, it depends on your customer base. But if you've got a customer base that skews to a certain kind of demographic, you kind of want to, surely you want to make sure that your bot kind of mirrors who your customers are.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Marie?
I actually had a fintech that I was working with, and we had a similar example, and we were looking at male and female avatars and names as well. And it was quite interesting because we're Australian and New Zealand, and when I'd gotten into this business, they had African American faces, and it was just again going into going localize it and ensure that people are able to sort of have that familiarity.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, we're talking about personalization, in a sense, we're talking about more personalized experiences. So I think that organizations will be moving to a scenario with bots where the customer can kind of, as you say, the customer can customize who the bot is. I mean, obviously right now, you've got a lot of voice-based bots from the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and you can't change Alexa's name. It's just going to be Alexa. Why? Why do I have to stick with Alexa? Can't I have a different name?
No, definitely. Okay, going back to this question, would you say that bot is better suited for product-based or service-based companies? I think we answered this question as
we answered that one. Yeah, that's right, along with the government point there. What about the integration question about integration into existing contact center software, or do you need a different interface for agents to use? I mean, clearly, the goal these days is smooth, seamless integration. You're integrating into chat applications.
Massively, I think it shows my age when I say I used to be a catty operator, and we used to have those screens. So agent experience has improved quite vastly, but also having those chat options within that dashboard just simplifies it, saves them time as well. I know for us, we've got integrations where you can incorporate different chats. So for example, if I was answering a question, I could quickly pull in a manager and go, okay, I'm answering this question, but I'm not too sure. Are these all the different options, right? And you can quickly check rather than, right now with COVID, what's happening is we're not in the same room. So how can we do that virtually? And having that all integrated in one place makes it a bit easier. What I would say, but yeah. What's the next question? Let me just start from the top again. I think we've just been sort of going.
Yeah.
Okay, regarding access to customer data, how do you recommend doing customer authentication? That so Steve, the question is access to customer data. How do you recommend doing customer authentication? I think that might need a bit more clarification, because there's, if it's high level or if you're going to have private information, do you need, the driver's license, or where do you need to validate that? I think that's
I think it's a good point, because again, it comes back to this point that we had about trust in the bot. So the minute you start interacting with the bot, so the bot wants to know, I need to know, I'm going to verify the customer off the back of date of birth, for example, whatever that might be. Obviously, the other way is to use some sort of biometric method for authenticating the customer, and that's more seamless. Going back to this point about less effort, that knowledge-based authentication takes time, takes 30 seconds up to a minute from a call. So, I do think that that a biometric, whether that be if you're on a phone, that can be either voice biometric, eye, thumbprint. Obviously, there are different methods to doing that, but I would think that's going to be the way forward.
Question: how has the current environment affected businesses when it comes to bots? Have you found there are similar challenges companies have that your bots can solve? And if so, what they are? Actually, I was looking at this, we're speaking about this last year, and there are 4 key areas that we're looking at in terms of what AI can do in terms of just breaking it down. And this could be industry agnostic, or one is solving the actual issue, avoiding and deflecting some of these queries, routing, and assisting, whether it's that's from the customer's, the agent side. So, so bots can help you solve some of these questions that are coming in. They can help you deflect a lot of these level 1 queries that can save you time. And especially with what's been happening where everyone's going to the phones and we're trying to direct them to the chat channel, you're wanting to address and so solve and deflect that from your other channels. Routing it to the appropriate person. So with everything that's happening, we can't sort of go and tap someone on the shoulder and go, hey, can you take this call? It's like, well, we're all at home. How do I route it to the appropriate person and make sure that that person is available and online at the time? And finally, sorry, mind the background noise. Finally, being able to assist agents so they can actually be empowered to answer those queries when we're not in the same room to talk to a manager or another colleague around a problem. That's my thought on it, Lauren. Steve?
I think, again, it just comes back to making sure that in the current, if we're talking about the current environment and the kind of questions that customers are going to be asking, to make sure that the knowledge base can support that. So 6 months ago, your knowledge base wouldn't have had words like social distancing in there, but if that's going to be part of your query in terms of how an organization manages that, you need to have that in there. And this is a fast-moving environment still. So what you needed to put in place 3 months ago is going to be different to what you're going to need in a couple of months' time. And this is going to be changing. As I say, it's going to be changing. It's going to be evolving. As we, if we do manage to have a vaccine fully available, what kind of questions will people be asking in that? This is so I think what it means is that you've got to be bang up to date with your knowledge base and making sure that your bot is capable of asking all these very new questions that we hadn't thought about. Pre-COVID, the questions were all very predictable. Well, they're very predictable, but they were codable. They were known and they were codable. And so you need to be super agile and super responsive and super flexible, and super smart.
One little example is we've just launched a return to work app, which is helping businesses support their employees going back to the office, right? And that's something that we wouldn't even have thought about 6 months ago, right? So it's again being agile enough to understand what's needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a question. Interested in bot training. How long does it take to train your bot? Indefinite. You constantly have to be training them. Obviously you can have the basics of it started. And Steve, you can probably give more background to that. Is it different in different industries? For example, you could use Freddy in all different industries, but it depends on your workflows. Do you have a method? Do you have a measure of effectiveness? How many query types should I expect a bot to be able to learn in a given period of time, and for how much effort? there's a lot of questions, but I guess it's all primarily around training your bot and how long it takes. I think that goes back to, I think we've mentioned a couple of times, just
I think so, and I think you'd certainly have the option to, you know, deploy the bot on a smaller number of customers. You can do, you know, A/B testing. So again, you know, you're training it with slightly different customer groups to see how it responds and so on. So I think the kind of the how long then sort of depends on, you know, when you're going to put it in a test and learn environment. You know, so long as you're working in a, you know, within a very agile process. You know, you need to kind of test, learn it, and iterate as you go. And so the kind of the how long is partly contingent on ultimately, you know, your lean and agile processes that you've set up at the first in the first instance.
Next question: do you have any theories as to why government departments are more behind utilizing and adopting such tech as opposed to private enterprise? Slow moving or risk averse for lower service standards or other. I personally think it's a security thing as well with government departments. There's a lot of different protocols and processes that they need to go through before they actually verify the software and how it actually works. So there's a lot of different things to actually work through. So this is just my experience and what I've seen, and even working for a government organization previously, like before we even got any new software in place, we had to go and get it approved by so many different departments and get it verified before we could actually implement it. And it's for us at that time, it was a big security risk. So Steve, your thoughts on this in terms of why government departments are behind in utilizing and adopting new tech?
Yeah, look, hang on, I've got a bit of an echo coming off the back there. I think that, you know, I'll come back to our CX maturity report, which found that government was generally more likely to fall in the laggards rather than leaders bucket. And so, you know, for me, I think it's more about, I think it's more indicative of their state, their level of customer experience maturity. You know, the fact that, you know, generally there isn't that, they have organized departments working in silos, internal departments working in silos, slow to shift to cloud, systems that are disparate rather than not integrated, you know, people that are not necessarily, you know, the support for people. I'm you know, being very general. I'm generalizing here, and you know, I know that there are examples of government departments that are much more at the cutting edge, but as a broad brush, you know, generally, you know, they're not as agile in terms of deploying insights and so on. So I think, yeah, there are a number of areas that really hold government departments, that are holding government departments back.
Yeah, it's not to say, like you said, it's not everyone. There are a lot of them that are at the forefront. We've got a couple of local governments bodies here in Australia and New Zealand utilising some of like Freshworks tech as well. Yeah. So yeah, not saying that everyone's behind, but yeah. Naming bots, we've done that. Best introduction. How does the integration? Yep, we've done that one.
There's one in the chat, Maria, about metrics, and so you're talking about deflection rates as being a really kind of core metric to use to you know, to obviously look at bot performance. And I think it's a really good metric because it then focuses on, well, what happens with the queries that are not addressed by the bot, and it talks about this. So for me, it's a critical metric. So the kind of the question is, well, what, you know, do companies have similar metrics? Is that deflection rate something that Freshworks in particular focuses on? You know, what other metrics might you want to look at if you're trying to persuade your execs to invest in a bot? And you know, I would kind of come back to things like, you know, looking at the handling time and contact center metrics as well.
I think it's an overlap in terms of, you know, what your current contact center metrics are, how they're being addressed, and then looking at some of those L1s, like or looking at, you know, where's the bulk of those queries coming from, whether it's an L1 or L1 advanced, understanding that. But one other way is going, okay, can some of these be quickly addressed? So how many of these are FAQs, and then give it a, you know, theoretical like amount of how many things you could address. Like you're saying, what was it, $60 per hour per seat for 8 queries. So if you could address 8 of those in 1 hour by using a bot, that summates to $60 an hour. How much does that save your business if you're able to deflect 20% of those L1s? And that'll give you a ROI in that investment straight away.
Yeah.
I hope that sort of puts it into perspective. Just generally, just okay. I think there's quite a few questions there. How are you doing with time, Steve? I know I'm good till 12:30, but I don't want to hold you off. I know we've got a lot of questions, and we may actually just follow up with these post the webinar.
I'm good to 12:30. Yeah, no. If other people want to just fire questions through, I'm fine for till 12:30. I do have to be away at 12:30, but 12:30 is good.
Same. What are the practical things I need to have in place to address that one? Local case studies for local government. Yes, there are some on our website. Okay, you discussed the importance of having good knowledge base information available for bots to be effective and successful. Can you provide a sense of how much is enough, and is this something you continually add to over time? So again, a knowledge base, yes, you do have to continually add to over time. Starting point in terms of how much is enough, that sort of depends on your business and that maturity, Steve, I would say, because if you have, you know, a massive FAQ library, you'd be able to, that's what I would sort of start with, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I definitely start with your FAQ library. It's a great starting point, but I think also, you know, I think look to all of the different sources of customer data within the organization. You know, look at all of the different touch points that your customer has with your organization, and map that out. I think, you know, draw insight from that, because it'll come back to an integration problem as well, that you'll have data about customers sitting in different systems in the organization. And the first thing to do is map out, where is that data held, who holds it, what is the nature of that data, you know, how accurate, clean that data as well, make sure it's up to date, and if it's out of date, delete it, you know, to remove it, and then integrate it. And I think, you know, that's what you really do at the back end.
No, definitely. Okay, just having a look through some of the questions. Okay. Well, this is an interesting one. What are the use cases for virtual assistant app? I'm thinking highly personalized and high touch, recurring, customers only. Virtual assistant app. Is that essentially, you could, if you're still online, Joe, if you could just sort of clarify that. Because I know that there's essentially a virtual assistant, or you could have a bot that's able to assist online. So I'm not sure if you're referring to like a chatbot that can assist them virtually, or an actual virtual assistant like, you know, with, you know, Alexa and everyone else in Siri.
Yeah, correct. And I guess there is a, you know, there's a scenario down the track where bots start talking to bots to try to solve a customer's problem. Because you know, let's say I've got a travel question. What's travel? I've forgotten what travel was, but you know, I'm trying to think of a scenario that involves traveling and making payments, and quite a complex, you know, kind of something that the customer's trying to do, which involves where we're just like where it involves bots from one organization talking to bots from another organization. So bot to bot chat to resolve my my query. That's the use case for the virtual assistant. And it's being able to manage, it's the super bot.
Yeah, I think one scenario would be, for example, I've got Google Home. So I tell it to play my music. It connects to my YouTube, and my YouTube plays so the bot and algorithm in the YouTube mix has a mix that it creates based on what I've been listening to. So you've got that creating a workflow, and then you're connecting it with the Google. So there's like that sort of, but again, it's just, yeah, that's a really cool use case. I think that's some really cool future problems that we're going to be facing.
And it's more personalized. That is become to the, again, to Joe's question, it's about this highly personalized, high touch. It's certainly thinking where you're thinking that's being deployed. I think that level of personalization is absolutely where the value is to the customer.
No, definitely. We'll just government customer. We've got Widow City Council on our website, their case studies there. We've got a number of Victorian departments that are also utilising Freshworks software. Okay, are people moving towards voice? If not, why do you think that is? Yes and no. I think it's sort of an omni-channel thing where we found customers are going to be engaging with your brand on at least 3 different channels. So I don't know. For me, I'll check their website, check for a number. If it's a helpline, I'll see if there's a chat option. So what we found was, when COVID occurred, everyone was jumping on the phone lines. And then once people realized that the phone lines were busy, they were trying to look for another mode. So I don't necessarily think people are, I think businesses are trying to push people away from the voice channel at this stage, because it's, you're trying to automate and utilize these bots to help scale and support our customers, as opposed to, the long lines in terms of waiting for someone.
I wonder whether that, you're absolutely right. And I certainly think in COVID, organizations are really kind of moving away from voice again. I think there's 2, I'm not sure whether Lauren's question is about moving people moving more towards voice-powered bots rather than text-powered bots, rather than the phone channel versus digital channel. I think that's what she's asking, actually. Yes, she says. So that's the question. And obviously we've talked about Google Assistant, Siri and Alexa as being the ones that we're all very familiar with, and probably many of us have got in our homes, and therefore, in a home-based environment, very comfortable, I think, with voice. If I'm traveling on public transport, for example, or I'm in a public place, I don't want to be, I don't think that we want both. And I think in the same way that we look at if we look at the channel mix currently, in terms of people still want the phone, they still want email, but they want to add more things in. So I think they just want to add a voice-based interaction option on top of a text-based interaction. That's my point of view.
Yeah, so definitely, and I think it's that whole omni-channel use case, right? Being where your customer wants to be served. So whether they're on chat, whether they're voice, whether, wherever they are, you want to be there. So I think this is like a couple of roundtable sessions we were doing last year, and we were having these discussions where a retailer was like, oh, I don't think I need to deploy chat because most of my customers are coming in through the door. I don't think I need to deploy it. But it's just like, well, okay, now what are you going to do with COVID? We've had to close the doors.
Exactly. Context is critical.
Yeah, definitely, massively. Okay, just a few more questions. Okay, we've got 4 minutes. I'm just wondering if we take Lauren's final question, or if I have a look at a couple of others there.
Yeah, whilst you're going to look at that one from Lisa about Deacon's Genie for students, and oh, that's Joe. Joe's coming in. Yeah, I'll have a look at the ones. Just Lisa's comment, Lauren's comment in in the chat window. So, you know, trying out a simple bot like a FAQ bot first. Yeah, certainly I think that's a, you know, I think that's a simple deployment. You know, it's easy. If you already got FAQ, then it's a really easy deployment for a bot for sure. And then move on. I think that's, if that's where you're at, and very easy, very simple, easy use case, very easy to learn from that.
No, we could definitely have a chat about different options that we've got there, and seeing if you are a Freshdesk customer already, or what element you're wanting to sort of work on. So we can definitely catch up post this as well. Okay, what I might do is actually wrap up. You know, we've done about 30-40 minutes of live Q&As. Thank you so much, Steve. You've been a trooper to stay online with us. I think it's been
I'd stay on longer if I could. I just have to get my son to his music audition.
Oh, God. Okay, thank you so much. So everyone, thank you again for attending. Majority of people have started off now. So do make sure you complete that poll in case you want to join us for that next demo day. We'll definitely make sure to send you that invite so you can register for that as well. That will be a live workshop where we'll go through the different types of bots that you can utilize, whether it's, you know, agent assist or the front end in terms of customer support. So definitely do join us on that, and we'll try and also showcase a couple of local use cases as well. So some of the brands that you are seeing in the market that you can jump online and see. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much again, Steve, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.